Just 1 month ago, I uploaded the Canon EOS Rebel 1300D DSLR camera review, and in just 1 month, that video got over 1,000 views, and now it has over 2,000. That's it, video over. I wish I had a camera to review. Say a Canon 760D?
This arrived from Canon.
Thanks, Canon. So yes, Canon did send me a Canon T6s, also known as the Canon 760D. So, without further ado, here's my review of a $1,000 camera, the Canon EOS Rebel 760D. To do this review, I went out to put the camera through a test of real-world scenarios. But first, let's talk about the specs. It has a 24.2 megapixel sensor. This yields slightly better results than my Canon 1300D, which has an 18 megapixel sensor. That's a resolution of 5184 by 3456. The Canon 760D has a resolution of 6000 by 4000. Which is why it has that 0.2 at the end, so it can get a nice round number. Also, a side note, it can clean its own sensor. That's just amazing. Sold already. It also has a thing known as AI servo, or movie AI servo in videos, and I like to call it autofocus, because basically the camera automatically focuses without you clicking the shutter button, which can be really useful. As you can see, I'll move close to the camera. I'm not pressing any buttons and it's focusing. I'll move away and it will focus again. It's really good. And also, because it has an STM lens on the camera, it's very quiet. The autofocus feature is very useful when, for example, vlogging, where you don't have to constantly click the shutter button every time you want to focus. And it's also very accurate. This camera also has an articulating touchscreen, which is very useful, but it's quite sensitive, even if you don't have the sensitive mode on for the touchscreen. And sometimes I accidentally click something like the Q menu when I'm supposed to click nothing. Now, when I picked the camera up for the first time, like literally the first time when I ever held it and looked through the viewfinder, I thought, well, what about when you're looking through the viewfinder? Wouldn't your face and nose touch the screen and completely spaz it out? Well, Canon's thought of that. There is an infrared sensor right above the viewfinder, which, when your face gets too close, it'll automatically switch the LCD display off. How cool is that? Now, let's take a look at the camera itself. On the front, or back, whatever you call it, there's the lens, the unlock lens button, the logos, of course, you need logos on a camera, the flash button, the microphones, the anti-red eye light, and the shutter button. On the top, we have the hot shoe, the flash, the main dial, the second display, which is quite useful, but we'll get to that in a minute, a focus points button, an ISO button, a backlight button for the second display, the on-off video switch, and the mode dial. The mode dial is an infinitely spinning dial, because there's no video mode to switch to, since you just flick a switch to go into video mode. This is very convenient because as well as photo modes, you now have video modes. You can switch between like auto mode or landscape mode or manual mode for video, and then if you go on to a special scene mode, you can actually get stuff like a kids option and a HDR backlight control option and many others. One small thing, the mode dial has a locking connector on it. This isn't one of those push in and then turn as much as you want locking connectors, it's the one where you have to hold it. At first I thought, hey, this is cool, I won't accidentally change modes anymore. But then I realized, I never actually did accidentally change modes on my 1300D, and that didn't have a locking connector. And then I realized the problem. The locking connector is just too awkward to use. On my 1300D, I was able to quickly change through modes while looking through the viewfinder, because you never know when you're suddenly going to move away from a landscape photo and towards a close-up photo. The mode dial is supposed to be a handy feature, but I felt like it was just too awkward to use the mode dial often. I actually found that while using the 760D, I was much more prone to just staying in auto mode the whole time, something I would have never even considered doing on my 1300D. Also, I found that I didn't really use the second display much, except for checking my storage sometimes, because of where it's positioned. On the top, you have to actually physically move the camera down or move your head that way to be able to see, like, actually the second display. It's a hell of a lot easier just looking through the viewfinder and finding out down the bottom what your ISO is, shutter speed is, exposure, all of those things are told through the viewfinder. Back to the layout of the camera. On the back, or front, whatever, we have the rotating touchscreen, a menu and info button, the record button, digital zoom in and out buttons, a Q button, which for most of the time for me anyway, is on the touchscreen to press, so it's much easier there. The file viewing button, the erase button, a lock button for the SD card area, a white balance button, an autofocus button, a multi-picture button, a timer, picture presets, and set button. Instead of having 4 buttons, left, right, up and down, there is now a ring which you rotate to move around the screen. It works well because it's very intuitive, it's easy to grip onto, and it's very convenient. On the left side, we have the external microphone port, the remote button port, digital AV out, and mini HDMI. Also, a note to everyone who thinks mini HDMI is okay to use on their products, it is not. Not many people have mini HDMI cords, but lots of people have full-size HDMI cords. On the other side, we have the SD card area. That's all. I felt like this space was kind of underused, but you know, they are running out of space to put on their cameras. Like, you can't put every single button in the world on there. On the bottom, we have the tripod mount and the battery area. Also, I really like having the battery area and the SD card area separate, unlike on my Canon 1300D, because it means you don't have to unscrew and take off the whole camera from the tripod when you want to just change the SD card. There is also NFC on the bottom. Now this is cool. Instead of using Wi-Fi to connect, which is a slow process, to transfer files or use remote control, you can use NFC. Simply hold your phone that supports NFC up to the bottom of the camera and then, just like that, you are now connected. So you've heard me drone on about the specs and the layout of the camera. Come on, let's see some real world performance. I took the 760D and took it for, well, I guess what you would say in a car would drive, but a picture-taking adventure in a very scenic area. So this is the real-world scenario of the Canon 760D. I talked about the specs earlier, so now we're going to see what it's like in the open. That's how good this camera is, so let's get started. Probably start by taking some pictures and then move on to video later. So let me start with a lens shot. Now one thing that I did mention briefly earlier is that this little dial here is quite I wouldn't say inconvenient, but the locking mechanism, there's a button in the middle, which means you can't just turn it, you have to actually click that button in, which means when I'm looking for the viewfinder I have to do that, which is quite uncomfortable for my hands, my understanding anyway. Okay, I want to take the lens cap off when you're trying to shoot. Now, this camera shoots at 1920 by 1080 at 30 FPS or 24 FPS, technically 23.98, but whatever. 720p at 60 FPS, and then 480p at 30 FPS and 24 FPS. It also has HDR mode, but that's limited to 30 FPS at 720p, so that's kind of a downside. And of course they have their compressed versions of all of those. So let's go into video mode. Really handy doing the video mode. On the camera that I'm shooting that is filming me, the 1300D, you have to actually turn the dial to get to video. On here you just switch it, which means you can have presets for videos. Okay, let's get a nice little pan here. 30 FPS. The touchscreen's really useful here. Okay, so one cool thing about the this camera is that it has another mode, one more mode than the Canon 1300D, which is scene, I think it says, but I'm not sure. And basically you can choose one out of 6 special modes in this mode to use. So you can have HDR backlight control, kids, which is basically like a high motion thing, more motion in sport, food, which isn't on there, candlelight, night portrait, handheld night scene, and HDR backlight control, which I already said, so let's do that. So we'll take something with a lot of contrast, probably something like this would be good. Okay, so that was HDR on. Now we'll turn that off and we'll shoot at 1080p, see what it's like. Okay, so now that you've seen some 1080p 30 FPS, 720p 30 FPS, heaps of pictures, I think now we'll change to 60 FPS and we'll shoot some slow-mos. Okay, so now I'm using, because I'm on a bit of an angle here, I'm using the articulating touchscreen so I can actually see what I'm working on. So I find the touchscreen, how it like turns and stuff, very useful because as you can see I'm shooting on an angle now where I can't use the viewfinder and I can't see the touchscreen if it's folded in. Okay, I think we're done here. That was the real world scenario of Canon T6s/760D. We'll head back inside and do the finishing conclusion. I think we all have to agree that Canon is one of the best DSLR companies on the planet, including Nikon and other ones. Because literally any DSLR is going to be great, like I said last time. But instead of saying the exact same thing that I said last time, let's sum it up with an analogy. You can have a good computer or a bad computer. Now, what defines a good computer and a bad computer? It's a very fine line. But the way I see it is one that performs good and one that doesn't. But a computer is still a computer. And computers are one of the most incredible feats by mankind. Only a century ago, there were no computers. There was literally nothing even remotely close to computers. And to come that far in just 100 years is incredible. And it's the same with DSLRs. You can have a good one and a bad one, but they're still DSLRs, and DSLRs are all good. So technically, a bad DSLR is a good DSLR, and then a good DSLR is a great DSLR. The Canon EOS 760D is what classifies as a great DSLR. It's up there with the big boys, the 80D, the 70D, all the I versions of the Rebel series. It's a real power horse. Last time I said that the Canon 1300D was a beginner to intermediate camera, but I feel like the EOS 760D is more of an intermediate and pro, somewhere in between there. I love the Canon 760D. I love my 1300D. I even love my iPod camera. I love every camera because seriously, you can tell a story with any camera. I even love a small video camera that we have that still shoots in cassette tapes. But I still love it because as far as I'm concerned, you can tell a story with any camera. And really, that's what it's all about, telling stories. It doesn't matter what type of camera you have. It doesn't matter if you have a good camera or a bad camera. It doesn't matter if you even have a DSLR or an iPod. It doesn't matter if you have an insanely 50 megapixel Olympus camera or if you have a little Kodak EasyShare. It doesn't matter what you have because any camera can tell a story.